Hello and welcome to this yet another special edition of Footcast Social brought to you by Dafa News. It's second round right now. The games have begun. The Ecuadorians have held the Dutch to a draw. Iran shocks Wales in a mega result, and England and USA share the ruins. But today, Argentina face a must-win situation. Can Messi turn his magic? And the bad news is the host Qatar is out of the FIFA World Cup. Now, this 1 week has thrown up a lot of surprise, but not many have envisaged what we saw yesterday. Starting with Samson, who joins us from United States of America, which is way past midnight there, and he's going to talk about the Iran game. Samson, welcome to the show. Just share your thoughts on how the things panned out. Did you expect Iran to bounce back the way they did after a thrashing from England? Samson?
Yes, and thank you for having me. I hope the cat behind me is not as entertaining as the match itself, especially the end of it. Iran ended up having a much more aggressive approach than we had thought they would, and it brought out a very much more open play, more attacking minded, which we had not seen before in a competitive match on an international stage beyond Asia, perhaps against the minnows of Asia, but against Wales in the World Cup, when you have never beaten a European side before in a World Cup, that was unheard of. And Iran seemed completely shaken mentally, as well as physically against England. We saw none of that on Saturday against Wales. So Iran basically showed up a different team, even though many of the players were the same, and they earned the 3 points, I think.
Absolutely. They did earn the 3 points, but Samson, one important point, coming back from a huge defeat like it happened, how do you think the morale of the players would have been at that point of time?
Well, look, they're facing enormous adversity. You look at the loss that they had, and that perhaps could have made them fold even more, given the situation back home in the country of Iran, of fans in Iran and abroad doubting them, insulting them, cursing them, even just because of what so much divisiveness has spread from the recent protests and movements in Iran. However, the manager, Carlos Queiroz, brought them completely level-headed and just completely turned the tide, perhaps, going into the third round. So it'll be exciting to see what happens from here on.
Well, that was an interesting point you raised about the coach who put all his resources to get the team in a kind of a well-oiled machinery. Mr. Young, an important point, that is something which was criticized yesterday of Gareth Southgate's strategy. You work as a coach, you work with the players. What do you think was the mindset of the coach yesterday? I think they were lacking the strategy or fresh legs or the intent, or they wanted to play defensive?
So I think what the intention should have been from Gareth was to get the qualification sorted in that match. The problem that we have now is that that Group B, is now wide open. Anyone can go out, anyone can still stay in. And as the nation that would probably be considered the strongest, we didn't want that. So now we're in a situation where we have to at least get a point in our last game against Wales. And when England ever play Wales, it's a very difficult situation. Very difficult.
Do you think, Mr. Young, they've got themselves into a little comedy of errors kind of a situation? Because Wales will be coming out to settle scores against English, and they'll be like injured tigers. Would you agree?
Wales have something to prove. And if we lose, then we're out. Simple as that. And I think partly is to do with a bit of overconfidence from maybe the way that we played against Iran. However, in a short format tournament, you can never be overconfident, and I think we've got ourselves into a bit of a problem now. That's for sure. Anyway,
we represent fans, and the fans have made 3 observations. A, English public would like to remind Harry Kane that he's a striker and not a defensive midfielder. B, Gareth Southgate has to win the matches in order to reach the next level and not just draw the games. And third, do you think Foden, Rashford and White could have come in for Mount, Kane and Tripper?
So I think we could have done with a little bit of a change. We know that we know that the USA were going to come out with energy, and the game was probably going to be a little bit more open than what we thought it would have been. So players like Foden would be a really good option to play in that game. Also players like Rashford as well. He would have been good to have. I think the biggest thing that we had, though, like I keep saying, is that we were just too overconfident, and it's a problem that we always have. We have to show respect because the United States have some fantastic players. Last night, I was especially impressed with Weston McKennie. He's such a good player, and we showed him no respect whatsoever. And it's a problem that we've had since. So, partly right, but I'd also think there's also something that we could have done as well in terms of our team selection.
Very important point. You're a Manchester City boy. What about Foden? Do you think he missed out the bus yesterday?
I think this was a game for Foden, for sure. With Harry Kane struggling, I think if we would have had maybe a more mobile player in there, maybe such as for Foden or maybe Sterling or Rashford starting as our strikers, I think it would have given the defence a lot more trouble because after maybe the first half hour, we didn't create anything. And one thing we know about Phil Foden as a player as he is, he will create chances for sure.
Again, another point that we observed, fans, that a link from the defense to the attack would have been nice. It's all well and all good pushing forward, but Rice can't be the entire midfield. Would you agree to that fan comment?
Yes. I think it depends on the configuration of the 3. So the players around Declan Rice. In my opinion, he is our strongest midfielder, I think. And he works well when he's got someone like Jude Bellingham next to him. And Mason Mount as well. That midfield 3 works very well. But I think once you start to chop and change that midfield 3, it doesn't work because the players, they're all so different to each other.
I think we have some connection issues. I will go on to Samson. We raised an important point. His cast his magic on the team and got them around. Your views about him, and certainly he was the deputy for Sir Alex Ferguson. Just take us through his personality and his traits and how he managed to put together.
I have to apologize, Sunil. I missed the first half of that because of connection issues. You're asking about Carlos Queiroz?
That's correct. The coach that we're talking about of the Iran. He was the deputy to Sir Alex Ferguson. He's a strict guy, but at the same time, he's got a heart and players play for him.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In fact, we just recorded our post Wales and pre-United States analysis episode today, releasing it later today or tomorrow for our podcast. And one of the guests that we had on was a former Iran national team player who's from the United States. He was on that 2014 World Cup team, and he said even when he thought he was going to start the first match against Nigeria back in 2014, and Carlos Queiroz did what no other coach he's ever had did. He brought him into his hotel room, he sat him down and explained why he's going to not go with that plan and bring in a different defender, even though it was maybe a feeling of rejection. He sat him down and he made him understand his tactics, what his approach was, and what needed to be accomplished. And I think that speaks a lot to what Carlos Queiroz is as a manager. An extreme disciplinarian, I would say. But at the same time, he does whatever he can to deflect any outside noise any adversity off of his players and puts his players first. He always says that he puts his players first to make fans who appreciate the team happy. And that's always been his priority. And sometimes he misses a mark. I think he missed the mark against England.
Right.
But we saw a rebound against Wales. And the motivation it took to go from lucky to have a 4-loss defeat against England, to then a 2-goal win in the final stoppage time minutes against Wales, a fellow European team, is definitely something for the history books.
Well, he's quite a contrast. You said rightly about Carlos, the coach, as compared to Gareth Southgate. Gareth Southgate plays a very defensive game. He lets his players sink into it, and he's got his favorites, by the way. Whether it's Harry Maguire, whether you're talking about Harry Kane, Tripper, Mount, you've got your favorites. But Carlos is a different breed altogether. I think he takes the heat on himself. Is it reminiscent of a Jose Mourinho kind of a coach who gives it hard, makes you explain the strategy, and if the players are in crisis, he takes the spotlight on himself and faces the heat? Is that a true analogy?
Well, they're both Portuguese. You can start there, but I don't know if I would go that far because Carlos Queiroz is actually similar to your comparison with Southgate. Queiroz has always been defense first. He's always been established the defense. The famous cliche "park the bus" if you
Yes.
need to, which they did against Argentina and were only beaten by a 92nd minute Messi strike. In 2014, did it against Spain, unlucky to not get out of that with points. And then that was the approach with England, except it just fell off the rails. So he's very much a disciplinarian with the defense first. This was a very out of the ordinary with Queiroz to go up against a favored European team and go more attacking, much more expansive. Other tactics in relation to Jose Mourinho, he does. I mean, a lot of times Jose Mourinho sometimes does not have a good relationship with his players, and Queiroz didn't necessarily have a great relationship with some of the big name players that he previously had. Like he was on the best of terms with Ronaldo in 2010. Ronaldo felt that he was too defensive in that 2010 World Cup campaign, and recently in the qualification, he didn't have very good relations with James Rodriguez for Colombia. However, when he finds his niche, when he finds a culture that he identifies with and empathizes with, like the Iranian people, I think it's a good combination, and that's why he came back to Iran.
Absolutely. You run a very interesting podcast, Gol Bezan, and you've got a lot of Iranian followers following your podcast and your community. All I wanted to ask you was, how is the psyche and the temperament of the fans right now? How are they feeling right now? Because 3 days ago, what I saw and read about your blog, that they were very hurtful, and they did say things that could have disturbed the players. Your views? Are they settled now?
Yeah. Absolutely. Carlos Queiroz came out after the game to finally face it full front and say, look, if you come all the way to Qatar, or if you want to come attack players, you're not real fans. You're not real fans of this team. Those kind of fans are not welcome. That's what he always does. He puts the players first, and he took the heat off of the players to perhaps help them focus and get their minds right for this match. And that's what happened. What we saw from fan reaction, night and day. From everything is awful. We had all these high hopes for nothing. They lay an egg against England after all this buildup. And with all of the mental deficiencies going on, we're going to crash out. We're going to lose every game by at least 2 or 3 goals.
What is the worst thing? What is the worst thing you read that the fans said? Were there threats to players?
Our sources told us that there were. It wasn't very specific, not to my knowledge at least. But It did go in that capacity. I'd say is from just varying things, probably nothing to take seriously. However, there were probably a word or two from the government based on to whatever extent any of the players were speaking out or showing any gestures that were anti-establishment, perhaps. But as to what the fans react, it's uh, to at least the fans who pay attention. It's night and day. Everything is much more positive now after we saw a complete flip of the team. And, results speak for themselves.
Absolutely. Where does Iran go from here? The last question to you, and then I'll put my attention to William and ask where does England go? But what is your answer from here, Iran? Do they still have a chance at the shot?
Well, it's interesting because I born and raised in the United States. I have the perspective of a player who grew up playing in the United States, getting to know these players, coaches, and I'm now a referee, so I know some referees who know the professional players as well. But what I can say is that it'll probably be the most physical group stage match this year because the stakes are all on the line. It is a rematch of the 1998 match that sunk the United States. So we have very similar circumstances for both teams. Iran needs a win or a draw. The United States has to win to ensure themselves a spot. And it is going to be extremely interesting to see how it pans out because both teams are going to be extremely aggressive, probably more so the United States. The Iran team might let them come to them a little bit in their game and exploit the counterattack opportunities like we saw against Wales. And the United States, I feel like with their aggression that we saw towards England, we'll try to bring that more against Iran, especially now that the stakes are higher. But, a lot of times it might open yourself up to the counterattack, like I just said. So it'll be extremely exciting to see Tuesday.
Great. I now conclude this conversation by getting in Mr. Young, actually who's young, from England. Mr. Young, what is your thought of the entire situation? Will England play as they did defensively, going for a draw?
Yeah, I think again it's the same situation that both Iran and the USA are in. It's a must-win game, partly because it's against Wales, but secondly because we failed to win yesterday. It now means our qualification is not secure. And when you talk about the political ramifications on this and the ramifications that could come on to someone like Gareth Southgate and the players, for us to not qualify from the position that we're in is a big, big problem. And it's a problem we've caused ourselves. In terms of where I think we go from here, all we can do is just focus on the next game. Focus on keep winning our games. That's all we can do. If we win if we win last game, then we go through, then we reassess from there. But again, it's a situation that we didn't really want to be in. So we just have to take it one game at a time to see where we go.
Final word on the score line in the next match of England.
2-1.
From the heart and the mind. From the heart and the brain.
England will win 2-1. 2-1.
Brilliant. I'm going to ask the same thing to Samson before we wrap up today's edition of Footcast Social, brought to you by Dafa News. Samson, your last take on the match that you're going to be facing against Iran's next match. Your views, scoreline. Samson?
I think it would be quite poetic to see 2-1 also, because it was the same score as the 1998 match, and I think it's very plausible. 2-1 for Iran.
Well, there you had it on Footcast Social, the special edition. You had Samson Tamijani, the man who runs the globally well-known Golbezan, Iranian community, and a football special podcast across the world. And then you had William Young from Minerva FC, the coach from Manchester City, who talks about England's techniques, strategy. Thank you for watching us and stay tuned for more.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.